that it like rings the doorbell, so I know I came into my own room. I just think that's really funny. I still think that's a hoot. I'm like, I'm home, you know? Like,
honey, I'm home.
yeah, fries are done, you know, like that kind of vibe. Good. I've got us into the chat. Hello, everybody. Welcome, 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 welcome. We are here. And Gary, I jacked up your name last time. So I have like a public an apology.
Oh, that's not necessary. You know, it's funny because as privileged as I'm supposed to be and am in many ways,
you know, like that kind
it's my name has been murdered ever since the beginning of time. I don't understand why, but there's all kinds of, it's a fairly simple name, but I mean, it's only 5 letters, right? But everybody, either they want to put a Y in there or an N in the middle.
That's funny. So,
yeah.
So how do you say it?
It's CATON.
CATON, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. I took my N out. I'm straightened out now.
It's all good. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it.
Which is hilarious, right? Because my name is literally the name of my business, my channel, my everything. And people will email me and just spell my name wrong. I'm like, it's just right there. It's the whole name. That's it. So what are we doing? Right? But it's all done with love. I think people are trying to be good. You know what I mean? They're doing their best.
Well, is it an IE versus Y thing?
It is. It's a, yeah. So I'm an IE and I get Y all the time. And it's so funny to see this beautiful compliment left with my name spelled wrong. Because I'm like, are you really talking to me? But
you must have some Virgo in your chart somewhere if we're talking.
Rising. Rising.
Right. I remember now. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet. We've got Gary CATON back, and today we are going to talk about this Mercury retrograde coming up in the energy of Cancer, and this is going to be happening June to July timeframe, and that includes shadow timing in it as well. We get to wrap it all kind of up in those 2 months, which is really kind of nice. And then we've also got some eclipses that are coming around the corner, so we're going to talk about this today, what's going on, what's happening. Gary's got some beautiful visuals for us. So if you're into that, follow. If your eyeballs are spinning in the back of your head when you see visuals, just close your eyes and listen. There's plenty of good stuff going on. So welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It's been fun meeting new colleagues through the Astrology Hub thing this year, and some old ones, and yeah, it feels great to be part of a community and happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's unpack it from the beginning and get in here. It's Friday, man. We got to talk about this and get out there into the world, as out there as we can be in like pandemic times.
Right.
All right, friends. So Mercury is going to be heading into retrograde June 18th until July 12th of 2020. It's going to begin the retrograde at 14 degrees of Cancer, and we will end that at 5 degrees of Cancer. And so that's the meaty part of Mercury's retrograde flipped around. We're looking back at some things, but also I teach that planets, when they retrograde, they've got to travel, like they got to get it together. So what we're going to do first, starting June 2nd, is Mercury is going to enter what we call shadow time. So he's beginning to adjust and get ready to flip around and go retrograde. So this is the part where I teach that they're packing, right? Like you can't just go on a vacation, you got to pack. You got to get your life together, what's going in the box. And so what happens for us during the shadow time, beginning June 2nd, at 14 degrees of this Cancerian energy, you're going to want to, no, this is at 14 degrees of that Cancerian energy. You're going to want to be paying attention to what's starting to get into your suitcase. What are you becoming aware of emotionally? What's starting to come up for you? Because those are the things that you'll address during the actual meaty retrograde part. And then as we get to July 12th, and we go all the way to July 26th, then Mercury's got to come back from vacation and unpack all that, right? And anything new that you picked up along the way, souvenirs, t-shirts, girlfriends, whatever, it's got to be unpacked on the other side. So we've got 3 different parts of the retrograde that are happening. So it's not just like Mercury goes retrograde on the 18th and then that's it. So there's a lot happening. Energies are very, very gradual. So we're going to talk about like, what are we looking at? What's happening as we're pre-packing, vacationing, and unpacking?
There is so much to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on with this retrograde. But I like to start simple, and I like to talk about the element that's involved.
Yeah.
Because you know, when you have a water sign involved, that's a lot different than fire or air, right? Because the symbol, the alchemical symbol for water is like this, it's down and in, right? And if you think about it, all the cool stuff about water, you got to get your scuba glasses on and look down under the surface, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface, especially like you said, in that pre-retrograde period where Mercury is beginning to, what happens astronomically is that there are big changes in the vertical dimension of the planet's motion before and after the retrograde. So the changes are already starting to happen. Mercury's going like this. He's starting to take a bit of a dive. And then when the retrograde comes, he really goes down. So there's things under the surface that if you're not paying close attention, you could easily miss. And when I say that, like under the surface, like people's body language, for instance, you know what I'm saying? People could be saying, yeah, like this. But they're they're fidgeting and they're going, yeah, but their body's saying, no.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. Oh my God.
It's like,
Yeah.
If you just take it as the yes, you know, you're going to be in trouble later because you've got somebody signed on board for something they don't really want to do. And so body language, listening to what people are not saying, noticing what people are not saying, what's not being said here that probably ought to be said or was kind of expected, you know.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
Yeah. Big details.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also noticing what's going on for you at a more emotional level, you know, and in your body, you know, because a lot of times you'll meet a person or and you just, you know, not necessarily get the creeps. I mean, that's a big signal. But sometimes you just feel uncomfortable or something feels off, you know. And or it doesn't have to be a person, it could be a situation. Something feels off and you go and your head will rationalize away that feeling.
Yeah.
And you know, we do it all the time.
Yeah.
And but like actually listening to that sort of stuff is probably a good idea, especially like you said in the pre-retrograde part, because there's not going to necessarily be any big obvious red flags like, oh wow, you know, but the signals are there if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. And especially, you know, I'm thinking about just even the timing today and right now, things with information, trusting the genuine intuitive information that is coming up, because I almost feel like at this particular time, before we even hit retrograde with such high Gemini energy, we're getting access to new information, and intuition loves information because it'll pop you a picture of what it's trying to intuitively show you, right? It's like, here's the closest thing I can think to relate this to, pay attention, right? It's this beautiful connection I think that's happening right now. So then as we're retrograding, it's like, oh yeah, remember I just learned that thing. And it's information, but it's intuition as well.
Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. And trusting the intuition, especially for men, even me. I mean, I'm trained as a counselor. I'm a trained listener. And I got to tell you, even I struggle sometimes. Like I get these feelings, you know, right now we're house hunting and, you know, my wife will send me, you know, link to some listing for a house, right? And I'll just get right away, I'll get this immediate like feeling of like, no.
Sure.
And I'll be trying to think of reasons to say, well, no, we shouldn't get this house because this or that, the other. And it's like, dude, it's a feeling. Like, and what I realize is that it's actually telling me, no, this ain't gonna happen.
Right.
Like this particular house wasn't even supposed to, like the listing was was supposed to be gone away, and it had gotten relisted somehow by error. So I was literally, my intuition was telling me, no, that's not even, that house isn't even really for sale.
Right.
Telling me.
Not even a viable, like really not a viable option, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that's
Right?
brilliant. That's
Yeah.
so brilliant how it works when we see them in live examples of in our life.
And it's like, wow, you know, like, so yeah, and then, you know, like I said, I'm trained as a counselor. When somebody's talking about feelings, you don't talk about cognition back. You don't respond with cognition, because what you're telling them is, I don't want to touch that feeling. I'm going to respond with some mental stuff, you know. And so remembering to do that for myself, like, you're dealing with a feeling, man. Don't make it about your head. Don't try.
Don't take it there. Brilliant. Okay, so we see that water element being involved at this retrograde time. So
Yeah.
we know we're in the place of the emotional body will certainly be ripe for the picking, right?
Yeah.
Or ripe for the feeling, I guess is a good way to say that. But it is still a mercurial energy. I love this. I feel like emotional intelligence is available for growth here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if we can learn to use our emotional intelligence, I think we'll be a lot better off in general, you know. I mean, just practicing that, like, it's a great skill, you know. And, you know, since we're talking about, so dial it down from like water signs to Cancer in particular. Cancer is associated with family and the past. And so, you know, you could find that a lot of your old family conditioning is coming up. Things that you thought you had left behind a long time ago, like, there's, you know, whoa, there it is again, stuff like that. That's the nature of Cancer, you know. It's about those things. So watching out for those things too, you know. It's like, you know how everybody, you know, you feel like you're a well-adjusted adult until you like go stay with your parents for a week, right? You know what I'm saying?
Then you're like, right? Or on the other side, you feel like you're a well-adjusted adult until your teenager starts throwing some stuff at you, and you're like, whoa, wait, what? I am unprepared. I keep thinking too during this retrograde, just focusing that energy of Cancer as well as like what makes home for me, right? Like what makes home, what's emotionally secure here. And
Yeah.
COVID, honestly, or the throwing of inside, I think has been a real eye opener, at least over here, but for many people I'm connecting with about where sources or people or whatever to interesting. And it's certainly a place to rethink of, well, what do I do to ground?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And how do I feel safe, you know? What feels nurturing to me, what doesn't? All that, those are really great questions to ask yourself and remember. Because yeah, there's certain, you know, if we can sort of balance those kind of things that we know, like, give us that feeling of safety and reassurance and whatever, with our intake of the other stuff, then we're going to have a lot better chance of, you know, acting like we got some sense, right?
We're going to need some marbles, friends. It's an election year in the United States. So
Oh my
we need
God.
all the marbles we've given put into the bag, right?
I have to give a talk about that, and I'm just like, oh, shoot me now.
Oh, I would love to hear that talk. That sounds like that's gonna be good. So you can keep us posted on that. I would love to hear it.
Yeah, well, there's, you know, the Mercury is stationing on election day, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
there's that.
There's
And
that.
and I'll just give you a little preview. There's a reason why the Hellenistic astrologers used the 20, the number 20 for the Time Lord number for Mercury, 20 years, because 20 years is a return where Mercury's doing the same thing it was 20 years ago. And what happened 20 years ago? The
Yep.
Count.
This is so
Right?
exciting. This is a topic like I'm super pumped about. Like I think we talked about that before the election stuff, that I'm just super into it. So I'm gonna have to like find whatever talk you're doing, because that's gonna be good.
It's going to be a Great Lakes Astrology Conference. Yeah.
Okay. Now
And
I'm
we can unpack it together afterwards if you want to.
absolutely.
All
Oh
right, cool.
man, so Gary's obviously coming back. So here we go. Here's that. All
Now
right.
you got that out of the way.
I know. All right. So during this retrograde specifically, what's the feedback you have? How can we make the best use of this besides paying attention? Is there anything else specific you think around this? Or let's tie in so we can make this useful.
Well, there's a few things that are actually helpful, that make me think that it might not be as intense or as bad as it might be otherwise. You mentioned that Mercury stations around 14 degrees, right? And that's the location of a very bright fixed star, Sirius.
Sirius, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sirius is known in magic to be a star that brings peace, brings concord. It's Venusian in nature, right? So that's pretty cool. That's a nice little extra boost. You know, I think the exact conjunction with Sirius is like June 15th in direct, and then the 21st in retrograde motion.
Okay.
So the station is right around there, and that only happens. It stations within like half a degree of Sirius, and that only happens about every 79 years that you get a station within 1 degree of any given star. So yeah, so like what I was thinking is like you could, like, you know how a lot of times they say, oh, Mercury's retrograde, like, you know, old boyfriends or girlfriends are going to show up and blah blah blah. That might actually be a good thing this time around, because you might actually be able to get some closure or some peace, or you know, or do some healing.
Yeah, that's the thing I was just thinking too, is that with the benefic energy of that, like healing and health, like the word health just keeps coming to the table very much so. And of course, it's Cancerian water energy, emotional health. That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
man, that's a beautiful set of benefits. I feel like it's a relatively positive retrograde as well. I feel like they all are, but some are heavier. This one doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, well, you know, when it was going through Pisces, you know, that's, oh man, that was a trip, right?
Yeah, we were all like, what planet are we on?
And Pisces is a place where Mercury has, you know, not lack of dignity, but it's as far from its sign of Virgo that it really likes. It's kind of like putting an accountant that's used to having all their, you know, calculators, and they're putting them on a boat, you know, in the middle of the sea with no, you know, and they're like, what in the world, you know, they're just out of their element, literally, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's not as much of that problem in Cancer. And in fact, I don't know, do you use all of the dignities, Stormie, or do you just do you?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like there's some dignity for Mercury through what's called bounds.
Yes. Okay.
During this retrograde. And there's also some dignity by face or decan as well. So that's also helpful. In fact, Mercury goes into, now I'm using the Egyptian bounds, by the way.
Okay.
Different ones.
Okay, that's okay. Well, you can tell us all about those ones then.
Yeah. So this is what that looks like. Let's see if I can find it here. So you can see here, this part of the wheel, that tells you that the moon rules Cancer by domicile. Jupiter's exalted. These planets have what's called triplicity dignity, and then here's the bounds. So I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
13 to 19 degrees are the bounds of Mercury in Cancer. And Mercury's going to station in those bounds.
Yep. Right? So at 14 degrees, so he's pretty comfortable.
Relatively speaking, he's in his own decan. And, you know, the decans, he's in his own decan from 10 to 20. So yeah, he's got a couple different kinds of dignity there. And well, I started talking about balance, so I should finish that before.
Let's just jump the track all over.
Balance dignity is about defining the terms of engagement. So, you know, for instance, you and I agreed we were going to meet at 2 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Mountain, right? I mean, that's when we're going to meet. That's so defining when, how, where, why, like drawing up the contract.
Okay.
You know, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do, blah, blah, blah. The planets that are in their own balance have that ability more than otherwise.
Yeah, because they have home court advantage. They can say, here's how I want to play.
Yeah, the classical example is like the principal of Cancer is the moon. She rules the whole school. But the classroom from 13 to 19, that's Mercury's classroom. And he says, yeah, I have to do within what the moon says because I work at her school. But in my classroom, I can do things a little bit different if it works.
If it works.
The moon's going to have something to say if it don't work, probably. But if it works, I'll probably be able to tweak things to my own comfort. And that tweaking, I think, is where, you know, retrogrades shine, because in fact, making adjustments is what they're for.
Right.
You know.
Course correct.
Yeah. So if there's anything where, like, for instance, you felt like the rules or the terms of engagement were a little bit off, now would be, you know, when Mercury stations retrograde in its own bounds, would be a great time to say, hey, you know what, this doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
This other thing is what would really work better, and renegotiate the terms. That's exactly, you know, the most positive thing that you could do with that energy, and it could be a really long-term positive.
Yeah, and it seems like, in considering the bounds and those terms of engagement, because Mercury is comfy in his own space there, having access to words to put with your emotions, right? Like, it seems like that becomes a lot more clear, where it's like, this is what bothers me about this, and being able to actualize that.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, because and that, you know, and that takes time, especially with emotions like anger, because most of the time if we're angry, it's because of there's something deeper going on there. Like, you know, we're hurt, or we're anxious, or we're, you know, what is it, you know, it's, there's a boundary that's been crossed, or something, you know. There you go with bounds dignity again, right? Like, I feel like my boundaries weren't honored. So you can talk to the person, and, you know, there's formulas for all that stuff. I used to teach my kids, you know, to make I statements, you know, when blank happened, I feel blank because blank. And so, you know, boom, you're talking about feelings, you're talking about, and you're explaining to people what's going on for you. And, you know, and there you go. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty positive. And then, so yeah, Mercury is in bounds from June 11th, before the station, and then doesn't leave bounds until June 24th. So from the 11th through the 24th, there's that opportunity to redefine the rules of engagement, you know. And you know, I think this is especially true the longer you've been in relationship with somebody. And I don't necessarily mean just your primary partner. I mean like a friendship, business partner, whatever. Sure. The longer you've been with somebody, the greater the chances are that whatever you're doing has become stale and needs to be, you know what I'm saying? Like these periodic adjustments.
Sure. And we've changed as people. So
Absolutely.
What was acceptable even 2 years ago maybe is not acceptable in the emotional body anymore. And that is supposed to happen.
Yeah, and just saying to somebody, hey, you know, we've done this way for a long time. It's just not working for me anymore. And just that alone, like, you know, that would be a great thing to kind of just, you know, allow to come up. And and then, you know, calmly try to address it. Or if you're not actually ready to, I just want to let you know it's not work, you know, and I would like to talk about it at some point. You could schedule or whatever. That's another way of defining the bounds, right? Let's schedule a time to talk about this or what have you.
That's brilliant.
And then, yeah, because a lot of times if you're upset, it's not really the best time to talk about it, actually. You need to come back with a clear head.
Oh, yeah.
Or at least you're not angry or hurt or whatever, right? You know,
yeah, clarity is good. Allow the emotional intelligence to reground so you can like have a second to breathe and think and put it out there. Because I think what also happens too is it's like, this isn't working for me, but I'm not actually sure yet what will. So
that's the other thing, right?
I gotta like be with that for a minute.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. 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 And then the decan, this is really interesting to me because the decan for this particular, the decans are associated with tarot cards. And that's actually what I was doing for Astrology Hub. And the tarot card that goes with Mercury in the second decan of Cancer is the Three of Cups.
Okay.
That's a beautiful, lovely image. I mean, you know, it's kind of party time, right?
Let's all have a beverage. Yeah. Can you unpack that for us in case, because I know some people are not tarot knowledgeable quite yet.
Yeah, so the minor arcana, there's you know, there's 10 cards, 4 suits. We take the aces out because the aces are closer to the, they're kind of somewhere between the major arcana and the rest. So that leaves us with, you know, 2 through 10, 4 times 4, 9 times 4 is 36. And there's also, if we divide the zodiac by 10, we get 3 segments in each sign, so 36 total. So it's a perfect match. And then each one of these decans gets a ruler, and each one of them gets a card. So in the case of cardinal signs, they get the 2, 3, and 4 of that suit. In this case, water is cups.
Ah,
Yeah.
my cup runneth over. Yay.
Yeah. And that's a really beautiful card. And it speaks to me, it speaks to, you know, like just yesterday, I went to meet with my dream group. I have a dream group that I meet with, and we met last time and we were all social distancing and being good and everything. And we did this time too, but afterwards, I went to my truck to leave, and then I had some, and I went back, and when I was coming back, a couple of the people were talking, and I went over there, and they were like, "We decided we're throwing caution to the wind. We both need a hug," and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." I was like, "Can I watch?" And I was joking and they were like, "Just get in here," you know, and so
awesome.
we had like a 3 of cups, like a hug, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't even realize how much I needed one until that moment.
Sure. The distancing, the physical distancing from friendship and community and each other has been, it's the emotional body needs it.
Yeah, really, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know if people have to make their own judgments on what's safe and what's not, obviously, but I feel like if that card's coming up in the astrology, like there's probably a reason for it. And maybe it's going to be safer to do stuff like that, you know, a little bit, you know, small groups, right?
Little something.
Yeah, yeah. So that feels hopeful to me. And you know, the other thing about the decans is that they come from way back, like Egypt and stuff, and they've always been involved in magic, and they're often seen to be kind of fatalistic on the one hand, but then there's this certain magic you can do to change that fate. And so with Mercury being retrograde in its own decan, it makes me think of like that there's things that we sort of thought of as fated. That is, they're just the way it is. This is just the way it is, and that's the way it is, and it's not going to change. We might find that some things that we thought were fated or fixed maybe have more fluidity than we thought, you know.
Absolutely. Man,
And
I am finding that and kind of edging towards that. So I
which
was
may be a
wondering
good thing or not, depending on if you wanted it to be fixed or not, right?
sure, or I mean, just the power of the magic magnifying mind. Maybe we just could never see it different because, from the perspective of who we were, you can't really imagine what you can see today. It's different seating in the arena.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one thing about, like, where we're at. It's like, yeah, I mean, it really should enable opening of eyes, and opening, and hopefully opening of hearts too, to be able to see and feel things that maybe we weren't able to before. That's, to me, is got to be the silver lining.
yeah.
You know,
I think it's overall, though, pretty silver lined. It's not one of the harder, I feel, Mercury retrogrades. It's just
yeah,
one that, um, I don't know. I feel like it's just very useful and we'll have an extended amount of time. I'm like, June and July, just plan on looking over this stuff and seeing what comes in and out.
yeah, and Mercury's in its own decan all the way up till June 30th. So, and what's interesting is, can I go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, please do.
I'm going to show you some interesting stuff, some really geeky stuff that I do with the astronomy. It's probably going to make some people's minds just go.
Yeah, if that happens, if your mind just gets blown over there, just take a drink of your water, come back to us in like 3.
Can you see this?
Not quite yet.
Okay, let's see. Let me see. Okay, let me hit that button again. There we go.
Oh, we're coming online here. All right, guys, it's coming along here. Oh,
Can you
brilliant.
see that?
Yep.
Cool. So this is actually the astronomy of, and this is really, it took me a very long time to figure this out. And there's a whole like story behind this, but this is the actual, remember how I said Mercury's kind of going along and then it takes a dive?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it takes a dive in the early part of the retrograde right here. It just goes, and what's interesting about that is, so the time when it's doing the hardest dive is actually the time when it's in its own bounds and in its own decan. So to me, that hard dive would be a lot harder if we didn't have that dignity to
Sure.
make it. It's kind of like, we're strapped in. Yeah, we're on a roller coaster, but we're strapped in and it's cool, And then later, you notice how it kind of levels out down here, and then it kind of gently goes back up compared to this dive down in the front part of it. Can you see that?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
just feel that, right? Like, obviously that looks more volatile than this. This looks just like a gradual climb. And this is like, I mean,
Hold on, hands in the air.
so
Hands
the
in the air,
fact,
going down.
yeah, so the most volatility in terms of the motion, that's just the amount of change in the motion is in the front part, but the front part has that star helping it out and the bounds and the face. And so it's interesting to me, like, it seems like we're sort of, we're sort of watched over a little bit in the hardest part. And then later, July, I think, is going to be a little bit harder, even though it's not as drastic. We're not going to have that dignity from the bounds or the face or the star.
Sure.
Um,
And if we
and
think about that kind of practically speaking, too, after it's out of retrograde, you've seen it, right? Like you've seen whatever has been revealed, and we start the climb into what do I do with it, right?
yeah, and that's going to last all the way. And notice this line here, this in the middle, that's the ecliptic.
Okay.
Mercury doesn't cross the ecliptic until August, actually.
So
So
we
it takes a long time. It's well beyond, after Mercury goes 14 degrees Cancer. It's well past that before he actually climbs out of this sort of, well, or whatever you want to call it,
huh.
this water that he fell into. It takes a while actually to get out of there,
And so
all the
that's
way until August.
like the path of now we've hit the 12th, we're out, we come even out of shadow on the 26th, but then I've got to rise above the ecliptic to get to the level of true consciousness, kind of.
Yeah, to really see it and get it and make it real, because the ecliptic plane is the Earth's orbit. And so, you know, that's making it real. That's like actually, you know, so there might be this long, slow process of planning and adjusting, and then it will only be actually fully realized there when Mercury crosses the ecliptic around August 1st, you know.
Really?
So yeah, so I think this is really interesting, and I've done some really cool stuff with it. That I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, you know, because, for instance, I wrote an article for astrology.com, and I wrote articles for all of the Mercury retrogrades for them too, by the way, if people want to look at those.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the chat too, just so people can see.
Astrology.com? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a link on my website too.
Okay.
To those. But I did one on all the retrogrades, and in particular the Saturn one. I just went, you know, Saturn just stationed recently, and I went back and I read, you know, what I wrote back in November or whatever, and I literally said we're leaving behind some sense of the rules or limits or boundaries. We're leaving that behind for a long time. And the reason I said that is because the particular retrograde that Saturn's in, Saturn crosses the ecliptic. Remember how I was saying, you know, the crossing of the ecliptic was an important part of this figuring out like the timeline?
Yeah.
In this retrograde that Saturn's in, he crosses the ecliptic and doesn't come back for 14 years. Never crosses the ecliptic again for 14 years. So that's why I said, yeah, we're leaving something behind. And little did I know. What I mean, how literal, and how, you know, I was like, wow, that's the understatement of the century so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not super strong on the astronomy part yet, but isn't there something though where in the retrograde time here, Jupiter and Saturn, is it Jupiter and Saturn who get closer to each other? Is that what happens here? Is that the one?
Yeah, Jupiter and Saturn both crossed the ecliptic in February, right as this COVID thing was exploding.
Right.
Okay. In fact, with the Jupiter thing, I forecast that the Dow Jones, DJIA, you know, the stock market as we call it, I forecast that it could possibly have a dive, because the last time that Jupiter crossed the ecliptic at its south node going down, that's what it did. And I forecast that back at ULAC in 2012. I said, now I didn't predict it. I didn't say it absolutely is going to, but it was a part of, I said it could, right? It's part of the forecast. And to the day, like literally within one day of when Jupiter exactly crossed it, that's when the stock market went. Phew.
Incredible.
So I know, I was like, holy crap, this worked way better than even I thought it might.
Right, right. Well, it is that kind of magic where as you continue your practice and you really start to tap in, it's like, holy crap.
Yeah, little did I know. So yeah, these crossings of the ecliptic are really neat. So Mercury crosses going down on June 13th. So you definitely want to watch that date, and then it crosses back, and then it doesn't cross back up until August 1st.
Okay. August 1st, you heard it here.
Yeah.
I'm like making a note in my life. I'm like, August 1st, I want to be, you know, just mapping out like what's happening. If you don't keep a moon or an astrology journal, it's a kind of a neat idea. So you can kind of see what's happening, because we forget and we can't sort it all up here. But when it's on paper, there's something magic about pen to paper. And
absolutely.
The patterns of your life.
The first 3 to 5 years that I practiced astrology, I've been getting this ever since I first became an astrologer. This guy, Tom Roma, he produces this, it's a day planner, but it's astrological, right? So it's got all of the aspects and stuff for the week, and it's all listed out by time and everything. And so I literally would just write all of the transits in there, and then I would keep a log of like, okay, this happened and that happened, and then I would go back and that's how I learned, like, okay, that's what this means, because I was just like watching my life unfold in front of me as I was watching the astrology, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, which is an amazing thing. And so you can add that to your Amazon shopping list as well. Right? Well, it's in the cart right now.
So let's see, what other goodies do I have here? Or I'm sorry, did you have something you were?
No, I was gonna ask, how is this popping in or playing in with the eclipse energies that we've also got?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah. Now, there's a lunar eclipse during this time, and there's also a solar eclipse, right?
It's a busy time. Like I feel like June and July is like eclipse time just in general is like boom, boom, boom. Like,
Yeah, there's not always, but this time around there's three eclipses.
yeah. And they are
There's
just rolling in here.
there's a lunar eclipse in June, then there's a solar eclipse, and then there's another lunar eclipse after it. Now, all of the lunar eclipses this year, sorry, I'm going to stop this for a second. All of the lunar eclipses this year are what we call a pulse or a penumbral. And that's a technical term. And what it means is that it's sort of minor. Now that's a relative term because it's still an eclipse. Like,
Right.
Don't get me wrong. But what happens is if this is the moon, or if this is the Earth shadow, the moon will pass by, the shadow of the Earth, just kind of graze it, or it can like get just the top part, or it can go right through the middle of the shadow. When it goes through the middle of the shadow, that's what's called a blood moon, and that's like super. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen one, but it is amazing. It's just like,
I haven't seen one.
and it's really powerful too. It lasts longer. Then when it grazes the top part, but it doesn't go right through the middle, you see like there's a bite out of the moon. That's a partial eclipse.
Yeah.
Right. And that's intense, but not as intense as the blood moon. And then when it just kind of goes above the shadow, sometimes you can't even see it, honestly, with your eyes. Like, what? It looks like a full moon. But it's close enough to that shadow that you can definitely still see and feel the effects. But yeah, in relative terms, these are not blood moons. These are not even partial eclipses. They're not necessarily going to be, unless you've got something like right to the degree in your chart on those. Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a huge deal. So, but the solar eclipse,
that's gonna be a big one.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I would focus.
Well, sure. And that one is also in Cancerian energy, just in general. So we have an immediate tie there because we've got the same sign, something going on in the same sign. And so at the end of Mercury's retrograde, he's going to hit that 5 degrees of Cancer. So, but even so, I think just same sign recognition puts us in the venue of let's pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty close. And that's a good point. When planets cross the degrees of an eclipse, it reactivates that eclipse.
So,
yeah.
Did you get enough? How about another drink?
Right? Especially Mars, because that's what was happening at 9/11, is that it was just like this year. There was an eclipse right at 0 Cancer in 2001. And then Mars was opposite that degree. So when planets cross the degree by conjunction or opposition, Mars was at, I think, in that 0 Capricorn, opposite that Cancer eclipse at 9/11, if I'm remembering correctly. There was when Mars crosses eclipse degrees, look out, man. That can be tough.
Some action. We're going to have some action.
Yeah, Mars won't cross this eclipse degree, but he will square it when Mars enters Aries, because this eclipse is happening on the solstice, right? So it's at 0 Cancer, and that alone is like a big deal.
And beautiful. And like, I find that to be exciting. I have a fair amount of enthusiasm about it.
It's definitely powerful. it's very definitely a powerful new energy, right? Because it is North Node. Now, this is interesting that you started with the metaphor of packing, because, you know, if you think about it, if the North Node is like the head of the dragon, right? There's this new energy that's coming in, right? So the dragon is swallowing this the moon or the sun, right? Now, if you're going to take just in terms of systems, if you're going to take in new energy, there's got to be room for that energy to just. So if your house is full and there's no room for that stuff, guess what? It's it's going to knock something down or break something, or something's going to have to go.
Right.
Right. But if you've already done your Mercury retrograde packing, and in the process said, you know what, this, that, and the other, like, you know, now there's room, and that thing can come in and it can be a guest, and you can say, hello, Mr. Eclipse, would you like to sit and have a cup of tea? You know, it's a different deal. I'm obviously, you know, inviting a dragon for tea, it's still a dragon, right? But
sometimes you got to have tea with demons and dragons. You know what I mean? That's just life.
It's better to have tea with the dragon than to be chasing it around, you know, trying to keep it from breaking all your china or whatever, you know.
That's right.
I mean,
that's right. Well, and there's a nice influence of Saturn at this eclipse that I think is grounding for us.
Of Saturn?
If you've done your packing and stuff, right? Don't you have like a little bit more of a serious view where you're like, all right, this could work?
Yeah. Yeah, and Saturn's still in Aquarius, isn't it?
Yes, at this eclipse, he's still in Aquarius.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, that's an interesting thing too, because that alone, Saturn in Aquarius is an air sign, so it's about opening things up and trying new things and making room for new things, you know. So then when you get a North Node eclipse, North Node is encouraging you to take in new energy. So and those two things kind of, yeah.
So Saturn wants us to take in new information, right? Like he said, seriously, I'm trying to show you this, but it's like the sneak peek, because he came into Aquarius in March and was like, here's all the stuff you don't know, by the way, you know, and now he's backing up. He's like, I'm just showing you some things you don't know about. Maybe consider them at this time, because it's going to show you why you need it as he gets back to Capricorn in July. He's like, you see what I mean? That's why you need this. Right? It's very convincing in a little bit more firm way. I have the Venetian Saturn conversation.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that Saturn passage back into Capricorn, I'm not exactly looking forward to that. Kind of had enough of that already, but you know.
Yeah, but that's the value. Like, you know what? One way to help people grow is to make them so sick of talking about themselves or being with themselves that they're like, I just literally need to be new.
Just do it. Just
take it. Yeah. So there's some value, I think, there.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's a really powerful eclipse. And I think that it's interesting, because so I don't know how much mundane astrology you do.
I'm getting there. So not a super ton quite yet, but I'm getting there, and I enjoy it. I actually am finding I enjoy it a lot more than some of the others.
Yeah. I used to enjoy it a lot, and just the state of politics these days, I don't know. It's you know, if I can steer clear of all that, I still enjoy it. But like sometimes getting into that, it's just like, oh man, really? But so what you do is you cast the eclipse for the capital city where you live, and then that chart for the moment of the eclipse at the capital city becomes the chart for the country and the country's experience of that eclipse. Right?
So if you don't know how to do that, or you're just starting to work in that realm, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, you want me to pull them up?
Yes, of course.
All right.
Absolutely. Like, let's pull them up.
All right, cool. So yeah, because I did. Yeah. Okay. So I want to show you the one in December first. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Because that'll
If
kind
I
of set
get
the
weird,
stage.
because there's a moth and he's stalking me.
Oh, okay. You sure it isn't a dragon in disguise?
It could be. At this point, I'm
He
open
was
to
once a
whatever.
caterpillar. Maybe he thinks he's a dragon.
Well, I welcome new information. That's where I'm at, Gary.
There you go. Cool,
Also,
cool.
don't touch me.
So, can you see this chart?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the moment that the eclipse was exact, Sun conjunct Moon at 4:07 Capricorn was at 12 a.m., 12:12 and 49 seconds, 12:49 a.m. over DC. And notice that the midheaven is here in Cancer at 5 degrees of Cancer. And that means that this eclipse was literally within 1 degree of the angle.
Yeah.
That's really close. And that means that this eclipse is going to be very personally felt for this country. And in fact, you know, what came after this eclipse very shortly, in fact, COVID, it's called COVID-19 because it was discovered in 2019, just a few days after this eclipse.
Mm.
And so what's interesting is that because this eclipse was on an angle, like, you know, over the capital of this country, we ended up feeling it very personally.
Absolutely. And isn't Jupiter the ruler for China in their astrology?
That's interesting. You know, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
red China, I would think Mars maybe, but yeah, Jupiter it's a big dang country, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very old. I mean, you could probably go a few different ways with that.
Sure.
But yeah, the main point that I was making there is that the eclipse is on an angle in DC, and that's going to make it really personal. Now, if you look at this one coming up in July, or sorry, June 21st.
I know. I'm like, what day is it?
So two things. The one in December was at 5 degrees of Capricorn, so it was close to the solstice, but not right on the solstice. But it was right on the angle in DC. Now this one is very close to the solstice. It's literally like 0 degrees and 20 minutes. So it's very close to the solstice, but it's not that close to the angle. The midheaven's at 15 Capricorn. So it's like 15 degrees. Now Mercury retrograde is on the angle.
Yeah.
So
definitely going back over, I mean, and as a country, you think about
going back over stuff, you know, a lot of people are thinking there might be a second wave during the second half of the year sometime. Notice this symbol down here. That's the asteroid Hygeia. And a lot of people are saying Hygeia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hygiene.
You know, yeah, like washing your hands and, you know, and everything. So now the interesting thing is both of these eclipses were in the 4th house. And notice what happened since December. Like we've been cooped up in our houses. There was this eclipse and it was like right over on the 4th house, right on the angle, and like stay at home, like, you know.
All the stay at home.
Yeah. Now this one is still in the 4th house whole sign wise. But if you did this with Placidus houses, this would actually be the 3rd house, right? Because the angle's at 14 and then this eclipse is over on the other side of that. The eclipse is literally moving away from the angle. So I think that this one is not nearly as intense for us, for our country, because it's not on the angle. It's moving away from the angle. But for the world, it's still pretty intense. And there's still obviously this theme, you know, with the Hygeia right there and stuff. But yeah, the fact that it's not right on the angle this time, that tells me that that, you know, maybe things here at least will be a little more chill during this half of the year.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's like, you know, right there. I mean, we've just ended the Cancer Capricorn nodal axis. So
Yeah.
that's a big deal for us. Like, really genuinely having to move towards new information and unthink or unlearn or really examine the way we've been doing things, which what a better way to do that than starting in your own house, right? Get your own house in order and then come tell us about politics, right? Like that right there is a big statement, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, if you ever read Voltaire's book, Candide, he kind of did the reverse. He kind of like went all around the world on this big journey, and then at the end he says, "I think I'm just going to tend my own garden." You know?
Sometimes you find it out how you find it out, right?
But yeah, it might have been better to have the garden in order first before worrying about the world, right? So yeah, so sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so this is like a cool kind of worldview that I think we're all probably interested in since we're all out here and it's going to have impact for us. In terms of the this particular eclipse itself in our personal lives, what's the greatest opportunity you see that we can leave people with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting because I'm just going to stop sharing because I don't think we necessarily need to see that while we're just talking about, people, right? Oftentimes the best answer I can give is just to be authentic about what it means for me and just serve as an example, just like self-disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading Emerson the other day. I was reading, good old Ralph Waldo.
Ralph Waldo. What a name.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of a name.
Like he
He
didn't
looked like
sound
Ralph
famous.
Waldo too. He had like a big old schnoz and stuff. But he did this essay called Nature, and he was one of these transcendentalist guys, right? He was like the inspiration for Henry David Thoreau, and everybody knows who Thoreau is. But he was talking about like he said even when I'm in my study, like see all those books back there, I'm not alone because there's all these words of all these people surrounding me, and he said to truly be alone, I have to get out in the woods. I have to leave all that social stuff behind. And it's, for me, the opportunity, that's it. Like to actually like turn off the world for a little while and really think for myself and really feel for myself and really like find my own center of like what the heck, like now that normal's not possible, what about normal did I not even really want any part of anyways?
Right.
And maybe going back when normal starts coming back, I'll pass on that part, thank you.
Right, yeah,
You
that
know
makes
what
a lot
I'm
of
saying?
sense.
And just kind of, yeah, finding your own truth, your own center, your own feelings, getting back in touch with them, and really like that. To me, that's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Because what did the Oracle at Delphi say? Know thyself, right? And I don't think that we can possibly fathom how much information is flying at us all the time. And I don't know that we were necessarily, I feel like we weren't wired for that. Like our brains are catching up. They're like playing catch up, trying to like, whoa, all this stuff all the time. And like having a break from that and really like remembering who we are, and really like getting to know ourselves, on a deep like soul level,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that while the Saturn is grounding at this time, because it's quincunx, it's a confusion. Like, and it's exactly that, all of this high flying information, and we're over here like absorb, absorb, absorbed, and it's like, nah, not necessarily like that. What do you want to do? And then we can use these Gemini energies around us to say, okay, now how do I do what I want to do? That essentially adds to the whole, but it just doesn't happen without some what do I want to do. And sometimes I only figure out what I want to do by figuring out all the stuff I don't want to do.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you know what you don't want, that's a really good start,
Yeah, sometimes that is actually like the front and the back door. I mean, it's just
Yeah, in
like,
fact, it's interesting. There's a whole technique in alchemy. They call it circumambulation. In other words, if we can't know something directly, we can look at it from many sides and get to know it from all the different sides. So we might not know what it is exactly, but we can circumambulate it. We can go all around it, and we can see all the things that it's not. And in the end, we might even know it better than if we just hike. Like, let's say it's a mountain, right? If we just hike to the top of the mountain, we're going to know that mountain in a certain way. But climbers call that there's different routes up mountains, and so, but if you go around the mountain and you get to know it that way, maybe you know it better
right?
actually by knowing what it's not. You never saw the peak, but you know it from all sides.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's cool. I like that, what you were saying, like, no, even if you just figure out what you don't want, that's a really good start. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome because looking at it just in my own world, everything's right now is so business and publish and be out there focused in my world right now. And it was about a week ago, I just found myself in like divine information paralysis. And I was like, well, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And it was exactly that idea. I was like, I need different seating in this stadium so that I can see the whole thing and know it different and then be able to maybe pick the path forward.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been great. I mean, because what's come from that is still, in some portions I'm like, no idea, gonna just keep asking people to come over this channel and I'll figure the rest out as we go. But it's like, if you don't start, the path never even begins to illuminate.
Yeah.
So a something, and it's been a great process because it's, I think I can't even imagine what this looks like over here by the time we close out this year, when I find out all of these things that I don't actually want
Or need. Yeah.
or need, or and it's just that I think for all of us at some point we're getting different seating in life, going back to connect emotionally during this high retrograde season, and
Hmm.
finding the new pathway forward, and knowing that information is abundantly available no matter which direction we'd like to go.
Yeah.
Information and people are available.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because, like, for instance, right before I got on with you, I took a trip to the store. I went to the liquor store to get what do you call it? Everclear, to make tinctures with. And I guess a lot of people are using that stuff to make hand sanitizer or something. So it's the last time I was there, they were out, and so I went back and I was like, have you got any? And no, we're still out. And just in the process of going back and trying again, I talked to the guy a little bit more, and I was like, well, what do you've got that's similar, and blah blah blah. And he's like, oh, there, we've got this stuff, it's in the back, we're not even legally allowed to put it on the shelf because it's 190 proof.
Jesus.
It's like 95% alcohol.
They're like,
And
no day drinking allowed.
And he's like, that's what the people that make tinctures, that's what you really want. And I was like, if I hadn't gone back and
Sure.
retraced my steps and just kept digging, I wouldn't have known about that because it's not even on the shelf. Like, the only way you're going to find out is that way. Um, and so now I'm like, man, I got a big old, and they only sell it by the half gallon too. So I was like, I hope nobody I know sees me walking out of the liquor store with this huge thing.
They're like, Gary, you all right? You doing all right, Gary? Food discoveries left and right, huh?
But yeah, I've got enough to make a whole bunch of tinctures now.
Tinctures and day drinking. There you go.
But yeah, it just makes me think of that sort of thing. Like that's the gift of the retrograde. Like just keeping going back and keep just gently, you know. And I mean, I could have been like, you know, upset about it. Like, gosh, you guys still don't have this stuff, you know. Well, when are you going to have it? And being entitled or being angry or whatever. But I was just like, you know, just talking to the guy, and in the process of just, you know, talking, oh yeah, well, we do have this other stuff, and like that's actually the good stuff.
Right. And it's so funny because the thing is he was the keeper of information that was probably to him useless, right? He was probably like, whatever. And to you, it's like,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh
cool
no,
stuff.
do you guys see it? The moth is coming. Okay, Gary, been great.
All right.
The moth is in here to get me, you guys.
All right, go get that dragon some tea.
Gary, thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, people in the comment sections are like giving you the thumbs up. So
that's awesome. Thanks, everybody.
It's always good. And so I'll be looking forward to seeing your
And we'll talk about the election at some point, right?
Absolutely. And we've got another retrograde to cover together this year.
Cool.
So we'll be back for that, and we'll do the election. And if there's other things you guys would like to see Gary talk about, let us know. Because
all right, cool.
we're happy to talk.
And you can catch me at dreamastrologer.com.
And I'll put it below the video as well, you guys, so you can make sure that you check it out.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
Blessings.